You think you know the story of Vietnam? Think again. Forget everything you've read in the history books or seen in the Hollywood blockbusters. It was all a sweet lie fed to the naive. Picture this: the most powerful military machine on Earth, armed with billions of dollars. Endless napalm and fleets of helicopters humbled by barefoot peasants in pajamas. Why? Because the American generals made one fatal, arrogant mistake that cost 58,000 lives. They thought war was just math. But in the jungle, math doesn't work. In the jungle, only the predator survives. But there was another force out there. A force that history has kept in the shadows for decades. The ghosts, thepentums, men who knew how to vanish into thin air, while the Americans stomped through the forest like elephants in a china shop. These guys, they crawled backwards. They lay in the mud for 3 days straight, letting us eat them alive, just waiting for that one perfect kill. Who were they? Why did the Pentagon hate their methods, yet secretly beg them to teach American soldiers how to survive? And what is the terrifying secret behind Operation Broken Wing, where the enemy was tricked into blowing themselves up? Today, we're cracking open the archives that will make your hair stand on end. You are about to discover how a handful of men from the bottom of the world turned the rules of war upside down, and why their tactics are still whispered about in militaries today. Are you ready to hear the truth that will send shivers down your spine? Sit down and buckle up. What you are about to hear will change everything you think you know about war. Let's go. August 12, 1966. Phu Province, South Vietnam. The air was so thick you could almost drink it. A suffocating soup of humidity and rotting vegetation that clung to the skin like a second layer of sweat. Staff Sergeant Thomas Bulldog Grady wiped a stinging stream of perspiration from his eyes, his knuckles white as he gripped his rifle for 6 agonizing days. His platoon from the 1st Battalion had been smashing through this green hell, hunting for a phantom enemy that intelligence swore was right under their noses. They had found absolutely nothing. Just empty villages, cold cooking fires, and the maddening buzz of mosquitoes. But now the point man froze. His hand went up. A whisper passed down the line like an electric shock. Movement at 2 minutes 0 seconds and 40 milliseconds. Men stopped dead in their tracks. 40 M16 rifles snapped up in unison, barrels searching the dense wall of jungle ahead. This was the moment they had been waiting for. The moment General Westmoreland's grand doctrine demanded: search and destroy, find the enemy, fix them in place, and obliterate them with the overwhelming might of American firepower. It seemed perfect. It seemed inevitable. But 300 meters away, invisible inside a stand of bamboo, Captain Liam Sterling of the Australian Army Training Team lowered his binoculars and felt a cold knot of dread tighten in his stomach. He was watching a tragedy unfold in slow motion. What the Americans saw was a single enemy scout limping and panicked, carelessly exposing himself near the tree line. It looked like an easy target, a gift wrapped in black pajamas. But Sterling knew better. He had seen this theater of death a dozen times before. That was not a panicked scout. That was bait. Beyond that tree vine, hidden in spider holes and trench systems, at least 25 hardened guerrilla fighters were waiting, fingers resting on the triggers of their AK-47s. They were not fleeing. They were setting the table for a massacre. The Americans were about to do exactly what they had been taught in boot camp. They were going to charge forward with aggression and noise, trusting in their superior guns to win the day. They were hunting the way a sledgehammer hunts a nail. But Sterling knew the terrifying truth of this war. In the jungle, the hunter who moves forward is often just a meal delivery service for the real predators, because the real predators move backwards. This was the brutal reality of 1966, when Australian military advisors first arrived in this war-torn land. They did not find a sophisticated Allied force ready for counterinsurgency. They found an American military machine that was gearing up to fight World War II all over again. They brought tanks, they brought helicopters. And they brought an unshakable, almost religious belief in the God of firepower. But this blind confidence was about to lead them into a trap that no amount of napalm could burn their way out of the broken knocking. To understand why the most powerful army on earth was walking into disaster after disaster, you have to look into the mind of the giant. Major General William Westmoreland, the man holding the reins of the American war machine, was a believer in simple, cold mathematics. In a briefing to Pentagon officials in 1965, he radiated in terrifying confidence. Infamously declared that the United States would simply outguerrilla the guerrilla. His logic was seductive in his simplicity. We have more bullets, more bombs, and more money. If we kill them faster than they can be replaced, eventually they will quit. It was a strategy of attrition, a grisly calculus of death that treated human beings like numbers on a spreadsheet. But the jungle does not care about your spreadsheets. The American doctrine was built on movement to contact. This meant aggressive, loud patrolling designed to provoke a fight. Infantry units would move in long columns, deliberately trying to trigger an ambush, just so the rest of the unit could maneuver and call in massive artillery strikes. Think about the insanity of that strategy for a moment. The plan was literally to use their own soldiers as human tripwires. It was a doctrine that had crushed the German army in the fields of France and stopped the Chinese human waves in Korea. Lieutenant Colonel Marcus Vance, commanding the 2nd Battalion, summed it up with the prevailing arrogance of time. He said they were going to go out there, find the enemy, and neutralize him, because that is what infantrymen do. It sounded heroic. It sounded invincible. But there was a fatal flaw in this logic, one that would cost thousands of lives before anyone in Washington dared to admit it. The enemy was not fighting to hold territory. They did not care about capturing that hill or defending this valley. They were fighting for time. They were fighting to serve just long enough for the American public to get tired of the nightly news. And they had spent 20 years perfecting the art of survival against the French, who had tried the exact same tactics with the exact same arrogance. The initial American patrols in 1965 and 1966 followed a pattern so predictable it was almost suicidal. Companies would ride helicopters into landing zones at dawn, the rotor screaming like banshees, announcing their arrival to every living thing within 10 miles. They would sweep through squares on a map, stomp through the elephant grass, and then fly back to base before dinner. Specialist Davidros of the 1st Cavalry Division later recalled the futility of it all with bitter clarity. He said they would land, walk around all day in the scorching heat, find absolutely nothing, and leave. Meanwhile, the enemy was watching them the entire time, probably laughing as they noted every mistake. The statistics told a comforting lie. American units were racking up impressive numbers with kill ratios, sometimes reaching 10-1. The Pentagon loved these numbers. They put them on colorful charts and told the politicians that victory was just around the corner. But the enemy kept coming. Villages that were declared pacified on Tuesday were back under enemy control by Friday. Jungle trails that were cleared with high explosives were booby-trapped again within 48 hours. Something was fundamentally broken. The American military was like a blind boxer swinging wildly in the dark, strong, dangerous, but hopelessly outmaneuvered by an opponent who could see in the dark and held a knife. But while the Pentagon obsessed over body counts, a small group of men from the bottom of the world knew the truth. They watched the Americans making noise and saw only future tragedies. The Australian approach to jungle warfare had not been invented in an air-conditioned office in Washington, but in the blood and mud of Malaya and Borneo. And they were about to teach their allies a lesson that will change everything. You do not hunt a tiger by banging a drum. You becometh tiger. In the choking green furnace of Malaya in the late 1940s, a neat Commonwealth patrol walked into an ambush that belonged to another century. Boots crashed through tangled underg. Metal cantons clattered, shouted orders echoed between tree trunks, and every sound advertised owlsly confidence in mass and firepower. Hidden only a few paces away, communist fighters lay flat in the wet soil, watching the column drift into a carefully prepared killing zone they had reconnoitered for days. A short, savage burst of automatic fire shattered the formation, turning an orderly advance into a scene of flailing limbs, dropped weapons, and stunned survivors scrambling for cover. The jungle had delivered a cold message to the proud heirs of empire. The old textbook tactics were now a fast road to tragedy. Those reports from Malaya began to look eerily alike. As the months rolled by, the same phrases appeared again and again in operational summaries. Ambushed in dense vegetation, enemy not seen, contact loss, pursuit impossible. Large sweeps went out with fanfare and came back with a few prisoners, a few bodies, and a grim list of casualties that nobody wanted to read aloud. The enemy chose the time, the place, and the range of every clash, and then evaporated into the trees before artillery or reinforcements could be brought to bear.